presentation this evening on how to self-publish the book. Okay, so we're going to do a quick company profile, then we're going to look at the traditional way to publish a book versus self-publishing and what are the realities of that. And my slideshow does not want to work. Wow. Our company, Walkerville Publishing, consists of my partner Elaine Weeks and I, and to date we have written under our names 9 local history books. We've also partnered with 19 other groups or people on local history books, and we have also published 40 plus books for authors who are interested in self-publishing. So what's the difference between self-publishing and traditional publishing? That's what we want to look at next. Just to give you a little bit of background, the first book I ever published was in 1985, and it was my master's thesis at the University of Windsor. And we were one of the first classes to be able to use computers to publish our thesis. Before that, you had to hire a typist. It had to be done in a certain style. So this book was written in 1985, and it looked at it. My thesis was, the idea was that people were going to be working in their homes with personal computers. They wouldn't have to go to the office. They would be able to connect to an internet, which was not even on the radar at that time, 1985, when you remember the World Wide Web only came in 10 years later. So it was way ahead of its time, especially given COVID. Everybody pretty much had to work at home. So my thesis 45 years later, 35 years later, came to fruition. The problem with publishing this thing was we had to learn a computer language, and it was very difficult to use a computer language, programming language, to actually publish something. So I was pretty disenchanted with the whole publishing business, and I was looking forward to a career in teaching when one day I saw this Apple Macintosh. I think I have one sitting right there. See, up there it is. It's the original Apple Macintosh. And coupled with this program called PageMaker, at that time they called it desktop publishing, and that allowed people to publish, remove the all the hassles involved in publishing. So my partner Elaine and I immediately purchased one of these things, and we jumped into it, and we started one of the first desktop publishing companies in Canada, if not the world, at that time, which was pretty exciting. And fast forward to 1999, Elaine and I moved back to Windsor, and we started a publication called the Walkerville Times, again, using this Apple technology. It was a local community paper, and it ended up, we did this for a number of years, and we did 61 issues. So we went from this sort of primitive newspaper to something that was pretty fancy in the end. And there's a long story behind it. I won't get into it tonight, but we quit after 61 issues of doing the Walkerville Times. In between, we decided that we would take all our stories and produce a book. And our first book was called The Best of the Times magazine. And this was a very large volume of stories gathered up on local history. It was very popular. It was 2 editions. I think we sold, I don't know, 6,000-7,000 copies of it. There's a real interest in local history. Our next book was published in 2006, and it was Postcards from the Past. So all of a sudden we found this niche where we're doing these history books, and they were well received by the public. I'm sure some of you have seen them. Our following title in 2012 was called Windsor Then. And after that, we published a huge volume called A Forgotten City in 2014. Again, just Elaine and I and 2 computers, basically. That's all it was to produce these books. We kept going. In 2013, we produced this book, 500 Ways You Know You're from Windsor. People are approaching us and saying, you know, I like your history books, but I don't see anything about the era when we grew up. So we put this book together about growing up as a baby boomer in Windsor, and I think we sold 11,000 copies of it. It was a huge hit, great success. It was a lot of fun. People still buy it. They love it. We're just about at the end of it. We did 3 editions. And this was very gratifying to have a hit, because to sell a bestseller in Canada is 5,000 books, believe it or not. That's considered a bestseller. Following that, we decided to do the definitive volume on Walkerville, the history of Walkerville. This was the book we called Whiskey Town Extraordinaire. And again, more than 400 pages of Walkerville history. We could have made it even bigger. Then we put together this massive volume, 5,000 Ways You Know You're from Detroit. Since we grew up on this side, all of us grew up with all these things on the cover and more. And that volume has just sold out. And because we couldn't stop, in 2020, we did another book called Windsor Before and After. This is looks at Windsor from two different times in history. The same scene. We didn't want to call it Then and Now because we felt that a lot of the buildings were gone that we wanted to cover. So we called it Before and After. And then last year, we produced a volume called Brewed in Windsor. A friend of ours died of COVID. His name was Bill Marentet. He had gathered a bunch of information about the history of beer in Windsor. So once he died, we felt it was important to preserve his legacy, and we put this beautiful volume together. So 9 books in total. Yeah. So what I hope to do today is to give you an idea what it is involved to publish a book, to self-publish. It's called self-publishing, also known as vanity, the vanity press, or artisanal publishing. So with that in mind, I also wanted to briefly mention, for some reason, maybe because everybody was sitting at home when COVID started, last year was an incredibly busy year for us, where we put together 10 titles. So here's the titles that we produced here at Walkerville Publishing. 10 different titles. We reprinted the Walkerville book. A client wanted 500 copies. So it was an extremely busy year. And this is where we felt like, okay, maybe it's time for us to stop doing books, because it was just getting to be a bit much. And really, that's a lot of work. So there's 3 parts to publish a book. There's the author part. That's where you write your book. I've written this book, or I need help writing the book. And what do I need to know to get my book into a form that can be published? So we call that the author phase. The second phase of the book is the publisher phase, which is where we are as a company. We do help people with the writing, but we generally try not to get involved in that. But the publishing phase is what we're going to focus on tonight. How do I get my manuscript that I've typed into book form? And the third phase, and there's Elaine selling books at a book show at Christmas. How do we get our book sold? We're not going to focus much on the selling part tonight. That's a whole nother chapter. And we're not going to focus much on the author part, because that's a whole presentation. So the goal, that's going to go fast, isn't it? Come back. There we go. These things are a little twitchy. So what we're trying to do when we're publishing is that we want our book to look like it was done traditionally. We're trying to avoid that self-publishing look that says, oh my God, I did it all myself. So we're trying to control it, and we want it to look like it's a professional job. So today, we're going to have these key takeaways. The first thing we want to do is write our book. And I'm going to show you some of these options you have to write your book. The second thing is I'm going to show you how, if you need to get professional help, where can I find professional help to publish my book? And the third thing we're going to do is we're going to look at how, so if we look at the publishing, if we look at the industry, what do you think is bigger? Is film making bigger, or is book publishing a bigger industry? The movie industry is about a $38 to $40 billion industry a year. That's how much revenue is generated from movies. But the book industry is almost 3 times bigger. It's almost $115 billion industry every year. And just to give you an indication, because when you throw numbers around, say, what the hell does that mean? I like this chart, because down in the bottom left corner, over here, it shows you what $1 billion looks like. We can see $100, 10,000, 1 million, 100 million. So $1 billion is a lot of money. Now, what's really a lot of money is $1 trillion, which is that football field filled with ballots of money. So when you hear the term trillion or $1 billion, that's a lot of $100 bills. So the book industry is still a fairly huge business. But what does that mean for you? In traditional publishing, once there was really only one way to self-publish your book. That's where you went to a printer and a book printer, and you developed a relationship with them where you would finance it. And the problem was you usually had to get at least 500 copies. That's not that great because a lot of times you're not going to be able to sell 500 copies. And there's many, many stories of people who are convinced in the past that because books are a better deal, if you get 1,000, and it's even better deal at 5,000. One time we had a gentleman approach us, a judge in town, who had printed 10,000 copies of his book. And he had only sold 500. And they came to us and said, well, can you help us sell the books? And I said, well, that's all he's ever going to be able to sell is 500 books. You're never going to sell any more. It's just physically not going to happen. It's expensive to publish it traditionally. It's very time consuming. Oh my God. If you're to try to put your book together, it can take a long time. And in the old days, it was really difficult to control the process because it was antiquated technology. If you had a book idea and you were lucky enough to get an agent is usually what you have to do to go to a traditional publishing house in the old days. So an agent might be able to secure you a publishing deal. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have 12 months normally, and you will get what's called an advance on sales, typically in the area of around $5,000 if you are fortunate enough to secure a publishing deal. It usually takes about 12 months to complete a draft. An editor will look at your book for 3 months. You're allowed substantial changes for a month. And traditionally, what would happen is an author would disagree with almost every change that was being suggested. So usually about 1.5 years from the time a book was accepted by a publisher to get your book done. That's a long time. Your book finally arrives in the store, and all of a sudden, the publisher has lost interest in your book, and it's very difficult to get sales. Is that it's a very crowded marketplace, the book business, very difficult. Today, ironically, more books are being published at any time in the history of mankind because of these technologies that we're going to look at tonight. The irony is that there's less buyers for books. So I like this little cartoon here. Snoopy is trying to get his book published. And he said he received a rejection letter, and what he really wanted was them to publish a story and give him 50 grand. Well, that's what we all want. That's what everybody comes to us and hopes that will happen. This is beautiful too. Will you publish my story? No, the end. A very short story. Here is a list of authors who are all rejected by publishers. All of these authors listed here were all initially rejected. They couldn't get their books published. So before the advent of digital publishing, which we're looking at tonight, it was almost impossible to get your book published. But these are all famous books. I mean, people are still buying books, but how do you break in? So Alice Walker, for instance, in The Color Purple. I love the snarky comment from the publisher. Your decision to end every sentence with an exclamation point was extremely jarring. What a reason to turn down a book, a great book, by the way. Dr. Seuss. Oh, please work. Why don't you work? Oh my God. Dr. Seuss was told it was too different from other juvenile on the market to warrant its selling. But Dr. Seuss ended up being the 9th best-selling fiction author of all time. And what's interesting about Dr. Seuss is he was turned down 51 times by 51 publishers before he got his first book published. This writer had her stuff rejected after 5 years. This thing is so wrong today. Agatha Christie. Agatha Christie is the most successful writer of all time, which is pretty phenomenal. But it took her 5 years to learn her first deal. So imagine how frustrating that must have been. This is J.K. Rowling. She's one of the more famous stories of someone who was not able to get her work published. She tried and tried and tried. So just by chance, the manuscript ended up at the house of one of the readers, and his 8-year-old daughter read the book and loved it and said, "We have to publish this book." But the publisher advised a day job, get a day job because you have little chance of making money in children's books. But Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, wow, fastest selling books, 450 million books. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I mean, this is what we all dream of when we write a book. I'm going to be the next one. I'm going to be on Oprah. Every time we hear that, we're like, okay. So the reality is, if you're trying to get your book published, you can spend 3 to 6 months knocking on the door of publishers and agents. And today, you don't even get a rejection letter, which is really disheartening. You know, every time somebody called us, we always made sure to respond to them, at least to give them an idea of what's involved in publishing a book. So this is all kind of depressing and, you know, not exactly what people want to hear when they publish a book. But we think that I like what Ricky Gervais said. If we look at all the great books that have had difficulty getting published, people think they know what they're doing. In actual fact, we have no clue what the market really wants. When people approach us and say, "Well, what do you think of my story?" I say, we don't really know. Is it going to be popular? Why are certain things so popular? Why are other things that are really great not popular? We don't know. That's the best answer that we have. So I would like to quickly I know there was a presentation last week, but just some good reasons to do a book. You can enrich people's lives through knowledge, understanding, laughter, and entertainment. That's a good reason. A memoir. This is more like an intellectual challenge. I have this memoir I want to write. We hear from people all the time who have memoirs. If you have a cause that you would like to evangelize, which means you want to try to get the word out about your cause, a book is a good idea. And people often write books as a form of catharsis, as a form of therapy to help them through difficult times. And another good reason to write a book is that it's really good for your career. If you have said, "I've written a book on this topic," and we've done a couple of books strictly for people who are trying to advance their career. Bad reason to do a book. Lots of people say, "I'm a great writer." Yeah, okay, we hear that a lot, but we don't even know what that means. Lots of people tell me. Money, people think they're going to get rich by doing a book, but the average book that is published sells less than 200 copies. And that is, I like to say, how many people do you know can come to your wedding and funeral? That's how many people. Divide that by 2 because they're couples, and that's how many people are going to buy your book. I'm going to be famous if I write my book. Well, if you polled most people, they could not name 20 writers, famous writers that are alive today. Could name a lot of dead ones. And then, of course, I want to live the author's life. I want to live like an author, whatever that means. So the self-publishing reality is that it's mystifying, it's frustrating, and inefficient. These are very difficult tools to master, and it's a very difficult process to understand. Once our authors go through it the first time, they truly understand what's involved. The best side of it is, though, it's very liberating to publish a book. It feels wonderful. You control your fate when you publish it yourself. You control what the design and content looks like. You retain all the rights to your book. You're not signing away some deal to somebody else. And the longevity thing, and this is what we really are focused on, is the legacy of the thing. It's going to outlast us by many, many years, a book. So if you're an author, we say don't despair, write with passion, share a piece of your soul with the world, and lose yourself in the stories you craft. But don't expect your books to support you. So that's sort of the author side of things. Quickly, some tools for writers. If you're writing your book, for sure you have to put it in a digital form. And the big 800-pound gorilla in the room is Microsoft Word. But normally you have to buy this thing, and it's a little bit complicated to use. So some people will actually hire out the typing of their manuscript. They'll write it by hand. We've had a few of those. One tool that's really great, that is free, is the Google Docs. And when you use the Google Docs, what's fantastic about it is that you don't have to worry about saving or losing your stuff. How many times we've heard from people who've lost their work because their computer crashed or something happened to their computer. Google Docs automatically saves it. It's free. It's really great. This is a really neat writing tool, and it's called Readsy. And it helps you write and typeset your manuscript. And I'll have all this, you can download this this presentation after. But I'm just going to quickly touch on Readsy because it's a really neat tool for writers. And it's specifically designed to help you write and format your book. So you can actually kill two birds with one stone if you use Readsy. Back to that. And finally, if you're going to write your book, make sure you don't save it on your computer. Make sure you save it in the cloud. If you can't figure out what that is, find yourself somebody who's young and have them help you. These are the four big cloud apps. All the cloud means is that your files are being stored off-site securely. And what's neat about it is it saves various versions of your work too. So if you are writing away, you didn't like what you're writing, you want to go back to another version, you can do that. So these are the four big ones. All of these will provide you with free. Google Drive is probably the best one because it will provide you with the most space for nothing. Okay, so that's sort of the author thing. So let's talk about publishing and how can I publish my book? Well, I'm going to give you some ideas here. The things that you have to consider when you're writing a book is when we talk about editing, there's three types of editors. There's the content editor, that is, does the content of the story make sense? Is it accurate? Then there's a development, which is does the story flow properly? So when you're writing, you always have to try to write for the reader, but it's really hard as a writer to write for a reader. So that's where a good editor comes in, where they can point out that your story doesn't make sense. And of course, there's the traditional copy editing, which is sentence structure, typos, making sure that it reads properly. That we call that proofreading. And then the next consideration is to get your book into book form. Once you have the manuscript done, we have to get it into what we call a layout in design. And beyond that, there's a cover. We have to consider the cover. And a cover includes a front, a spine, and a back. So there's three parts to a cover. And then we get to the stage where we're finally ready to print it. But what happens if you print your book and you're not happy with it when it comes back? So I'm going to show you a way that we can avoid that problem. And now we also have this whole thing about ebooks. What do we do about ebooks? Oh my God, it gets more complicated. Then we got all the software, we got utilities. And so we got our book done, and then we got to consider, oh my God, now we got to sell it, marketing, sales. Oh. And on top of all that, you got your life to deal with. So how does writing a book fit into your life? It's complicated. I mean, Elaine's writing her book, her second volume of her novel, and it's very complicated to find the space in your life to do it, to get in the right headspace to write your book. I like this chart. So when clients used to come to us, we always said, well, you got three options. You can have a good book, you can have a cheap book, or you can have a fast book. Problem is you can only have 2 out of 3. So if you want it good and fast, that's expensive and good. If you want it good and cheap, it's slow and good. If you want it fast and cheap, you're going to get a low quality, which we don't deal in the fast and cheap at all. We deal over here in the good and fast. And in the middle, it's not possible. Some considerations. To imagine now that you've got your book, you have to consider all the parts of a book. Usually when you open a book, there's a half title, which is just the book itself, book title. Then you have a proper title page. Then you have a copyright page, a dedication, might dedicate the book to somebody, table of contents, a foreword, usually written by somebody else, not you, an epigraph, acknowledgements. An epigraph is a quote, generally, or a small passage. Acknowledgements, who helped you? A preface or introduction, that's by the author. A prologue, which might introduce the story somehow. The body matter, which is the book itself. The back matter, sometimes books have notes on the story. An afterword or epilogue. Appendix, which is helpful for the reader. A glossary of words used in the book. A bibliography or endnote. An index. This is parts of a book. I mean, and then an author's biography. And now they also are adding things like how to join the author online for a discussion. There's all kinds of extra marketing that's put in the back of a book. I didn't even add that. So I've listed this here for you. And if you want to download this at the end, I'll show you where you can go and you can download this. And this kind of gives you, this is a helpful guide on how to structure your book, which is really, really handy because you leave something out and it just feels like there's something wrong with your book. So this won't work. There is a standard for registering your book with the worldwide. There's a worldwide system to register your book. It's called ISBN, International Standard of Book Number. Now in the States, unfortunately, they have to buy these, but in Canada, you can register with the Canadian Government Archives, and you can get a number for free, ISBN. And I think it's important if you're going to publish a book to have your own ISBN independently. You don't want to have to go through a company and let them get your ISBN because they will hold your registration for you. You don't want that. So we say secure your ISBN independently, and it makes you the publisher of record for your book. People always ask us about copyright. In Canada and worldwide, it's called intellectual property. Some countries are not signatories to intellectual property, but many, many are. And because of that, your work is automatically protected. So you don't have to worry about anybody stealing your work because your work is protected. If you're going to write a book, you're not allowed to use song lyrics, even though you want to. We published a book with Tracy Rogers at White Feather on Ottawa, and she wanted to use song lyrics, but she was not able to. But she could mention the song and she could mention how the lyrics worked, but she could not quote the lyrics because every time you mention song lyrics, you have to buy it for it's about $100, which is not cheap. If you're going to refer to sources, use them It's nice to cite them in the back of the book. Try not to plagiarize, and I put a link here in the Creative Commons for you to see how you can learn more about that whole thing. So when it comes to covers of your book, you know, you only have two options. Oh, this thing's really happy now. It's either working or it's not. Let's go back here. You have two options with a cover. You can design it yourself, or you can hire a designer. There's nothing in between. So we're going to give you a couple of tips on how to do that. There is the truth that people do judge your book by its cover. So cover is very important. We call it the window into the soul of your book. It is going, you look at it and you try to get a sense of what the book's about. And these days, because everything's on the internet, it's got to also work as a little teeny weeny icon, which is kind of interesting. Self-published books tend to have very bad covers. They tend to have amateur publishing names. They tend to have too much information on the back. We call that blurb overload, and they tend to be poorly typeset. So I wanted to just show you a few really bad cover ideas. Why not, eh? That's probably unfortunate for a title. Not sure about this one. What do you think? Probably not going to be a winner. Okay. Maybe, I mean, there's a book for everything, but this might be drawing the line. This is an unfortunate title, I'm afraid. Yeah, that's not the greatest. Just leave that there. Not sure about Beethoven here. Probably not sending a good message, but there you have it. This is in my all-time worst covers I've ever seen. Fancy covers to make yourself. So let's say, oh, I like what I'm hearing. I really want to learn how to do my own book. Well, one of the ways you can do that is on a website called Canva. Let's just take a quick peek at what that looks like. So this is Canva, C-A-N-V-A. This gal in Australia started this company with the idea that you could be your own designer, be your own graphic designer. These are all templates. And this now is a multi-billion-dollar company. And she still gives you free cover ideas. So that's Canva. I'm going to go back here and try. Is the screen sharing now? Elaine, can you see Canva on the screen?
Yep, we can see it.
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. No, are we on the PowerPoint now? Sorry.
No,
Oh, my Lord. I'm not having a good day, am I?
you're still on Canva.
All right, let me escape. Canva, share.
There you go.
All right, so that's one cool tool. But let's say, oh, I'm getting frustrated and I don't really want to do my own cover. So I want to hire a designer. So this gives you sort of a ballpark range of what it would cost you to hire a designer to do your cover. Between $400 and $800. This is from the Reedsy study in 2017. And these are the various prices that you might pay to hire a professional designer to do your cover. So all you have to do is type in book cover. And there's all kinds of people. What you do is you look for people who have done a lot of reviews, because the only way you can get a review is if you've actually done the work. It's not anonymous, so you actually have to do the work. So read the reviews, and I've given you 4 sources here. Make sure we're on the right one here. We back to the screen show here, the slideshow. Yeah. Interior of your book is another big challenge. We use Adobe InDesign. It is the standard in the industry for doing book design. It's very complicated. I wouldn't even recommend you try to open it. A lot of people, believe it or not, are publishing their books using Microsoft Word. The only hitch is you have to learn how to do style sheets. And that's, again, there are lots of people on those freelance websites that will help you lay out your book at a very reasonable price if that's what you're looking for. Average $500 to $1,000 to find the right kind of person. You could probably get your book done on a site like Fiverr or 99 Design for under $1,000, cover and interior, ready for print. It's not crazy. Author services. So if you now we're getting ready to print our book. We have everything ready. We found a designer, or we designed it ourselves, if we're lucky. Now we got to figure out how to print this thing. The self-publishing in the last 10 years has exploded. So 84% of all titles being printed now are self-published. So you're not really pioneering anything, and it continues to grow like mad. Surprisingly, ebooks have not caught on. So ebooks still represent only about 1/5 of the market. Here's the company that we really like. And the reason is, if you're thinking of publishing your book, getting it printed, the reason why you want to go with Kindle is it's an Amazon company, which means that they're going to put your book all over the world for you if you publish with them. It's a great way to self-publish. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them, but there is a link, and it's a wonderful way. We publish a lot of books with Kindle for our authors. They can put their book on Amazon. They don't have to buy any books. They can buy 1 or 2 copies, and the rest they can just tell people to go on Amazon and buy it. Couldn't be easier, but it's a little bit of a roller coaster to learn. You know, in a roller coaster, you got to go up, 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 really, really slow. And then when you get to the top, it gets a little easier to go down. So again, that is the 800-pound gorilla is Kindle, direct publishing. Yeah, it's a self-publishing platform. You can get books printed really cheap on Amazon. We just did a 300-page book, and it was like $6 per copy printed, which is phenomenal. So Kindle, Amazon has changed publishing. They changed it with their whole online method. Well, they've changed it with book publishing as well. According to Walker, in 2011, there were 250,000 ISBNs assigned for books. And by 2016, the number of self-publishing titles had tripled in 5 years. That's incredible. And more than 2/3 were assigned to Amazon. And Lulu is the other company we're going to talk about, and Blurb. So if you just want to get a few copies and you want to go to something that's really beautiful, more high-end, then you go to a company called Lulu. This is founded by women. It's a very cool company. We use them. They do phenomenal books. So if a client comes to us and they only want 20 copies, but they want a real high-end memoir, which we've done several, we go to Lulu. It's a wonderful company, and they have printed thousands of titles. They came from nowhere, and they're really, really done well. The third company, there's really only 3 players. There's one more, but yeah, Lulu, full service, many different sizes. They have a wide range of services as well. They do all kinds of things, and they will actually I can't say enough good things about them. I have put together a link for you. Blurb is the third company, and Blurb is a lot like Lulu. They do beautiful high-end books. They do black and white through to full color coffee table books. So yeah, again, author publishing. I can't say enough about these folks as well. So there's 3 really great companies to consider if you need to get your book printed. I wanted to offer you one more option as well. You can see how much we talked about how much the self-publishing thing has increased in the last 10 years. It's gone insane, really. when you go online, you'll see a lot of companies offering to help you do your book, but a lot of them really want a lot of money up front. They're really interested in, and they guarantee you all kinds of things that we are very skeptical about. And they usually want you to print a lot of copies. So, yeah, if you don't mind, thank you. Joking a little bit. Sorry about that. Something that happened about 10 years ago is Xerox introduced a photocopier. They called it an espresso. And the way it works is you put your file in the front through a zip drive or download it. And they put the file in and it runs through like a photocopier and it puts a cover on and it ships it out the back as a finished book. It's incredible. Unfortunately, we had one at the Windsor Public Library, but they got rid of it. Anyway, you know what? We're real tight for time. So I'm going to skip over this. But if you want to watch the video on the espresso machine, it's fascinating. File in the front, book out the back. And the reason why we got excited when we saw this for the first time, a press called Asquith, and at the Toronto Public Library, they will help you get your file printed. And what's beautiful about this is you can print one copy of your book. So what's really phenomenal about being able to print one copy of your book is that copy can act as your proof. And it's incredible to be able to actually get a copy of the book, because traditionally what happens is you got to get 500. You get 500, you start noticing all kinds of things wrong with them. Now you can't sleep at night. You get one copy of your book as a proof. You can do the same thing with Amazon. You can do the same thing with Lulu. You get one copy and you go through it and you make all your changes on an actual book as opposed to a printout, which never looks like a book, a printout. So I have put a link to that in Toronto. You can talk to them. And if you're in Toronto, it'll be worth going to see how this all works. I wish we had one in Windsor, but we don't. So your book comes back, as I said. You've got 500 copies or 5,000 or whatever. And this happens all the time with our clients. For some reason, the typos only pop out when the book's done. So you got typos, there's stuff missing, there's errors. There's two kinds of errors. You leave stuff out or you did it the wrong way. Commission and omission. At that point, it's fire and forget. In other words, we got to go sell these books now with all the mistakes in them. You're never going to get it perfect, no matter how hard you try. Or you can follow the relentless pursuit of perfection, which can really be another crazy path. But for self-publishing, the beauty is you get your one copy. That's your proof. It costs you under $50 to get your one copy. So what we were doing with all our clients was we were making them get one copy as a proof. We forced them because we didn't want them to get their whole order right away. And of course, if the client didn't want to do that, they always regretted it because there's always mistakes in a book. It just can't be helped. Quickly about ebooks. I put a link here to Smashwords. If you need to get your book converted to ebooks, most companies will do them for you now. Smashwords is the best company. But ebook is a whole nother presentation. We have not been especially in love with these because it's really hard to make any money with them. The only beauty of ebooks is they're really easy to share with everyone. So if you're not doing this for money, ebooks are phenomenal. Really, in summary, look at that. We're going to fit right on time. The thing about publishing, about writing, and about selling books is it's continuous learning. You can never stop learning about it. I have some resources here for you. This is the best resource on the internet, in my opinion. This is Mark Dawson's self-publishing format. This is incredible. Mark Dawson runs the self-publishing formula twice a year. It's a course you can take that teaches you how to sell your book. His focus is on how to make money selling your book. What's really great about Mark is he's got a blog divided into 3 parts. He calls it craft, production, marketing. I call it author, publisher, entrepreneur, same type of thing. The 3 things we talked about earlier. So for instance, if you're interested in production, You just click on it, and Mark has all kinds of free seminars. I mean, that's his courses. If you go to his blog, I got this backwards. I apologize. If you go to his blog, he's got tons of free stuff, and all of these are an hour. So whatever you want to learn about publishing a book is here. I mean, this is incredible. Mark Dawson is amazing. He's a real positive guy. He's fun to listen to. He's got a good sense of humor. I mean, you can just, there's no topic I don't think that he's not covered. Plus, he has a big resource list. Mark Dawson, I put the link in. TED. TED is a really great place to be for writers as well. These are some of the TEDs I like. Elizabeth Gilbert, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love, and several other bestsellers. Her TED presentation is very inspiring for writers. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple, Amy Tan, famous author, Lisa Boo, another famous author. Just really positive stuff on how to feel if you're having a bad day or you feel like you can't really get anywhere with your books. You go on and you listen to TED speeches are usually always under 20 minutes. I especially recommend Ken Robinson and Elizabeth Gilbert and Steve Jobs, but all of these are the ones I like, but you can go down the rabbit hole there and never come back. It's incredible. I also have a list of blogs for writers. If you need to be inspired, Seth Godin, he is a remarkable human being, and his stuff is well worth listening to. And he talks about publishing books all the time, and Tim Ferriss as well. All of these actually really great. The Domino Project is Seth Godin's publishing endeavor. Highly recommended. These are the books that I really recommend. The Ape, author, publisher, entrepreneur, Guy Kawasaki and Sean Wealth. Max Perkins was the guy who worked with Hemingway and F. Scott Fitzgerald. Really wonderful. And Elmore Leonard, who is from Detroit, and his 10 rules of writing. Rule number 1 is leave out the stuff that people don't want to read. I love that. And let's see, self-publishing. It's really the best thing that's ever happened. You know, from our perspective, we got in early. We've been doing this now for 37 years. We saw it all change, mature. And when authors started coming to us and wanted to do books, we had to figure out how to do it. There was nobody helping us. But we really think it's like the greatest thing that's ever happened to authors. You can do it. You can go get help. I've given you a bunch of resources. If you get stuck, you can always contact us. We prefer to hear from you by email if possible. So in short, write yourself a good book. Define what success means to you. Do I just do it for one of the good reasons, or am I doing it for one of the bad reasons? And then it's a long haul to do a book. Everybody's going to have a different reason why they want to publish a book, but it is a long haul. Remember Sisyphus trying to push that rock up the hill. Persistence is the key.